Magnifico. Our very own road movie. Friend of yours?
Are you kidding?
The history behind Garcia's hellish odyssey to rescue the angelic Paula was paved with rocky beginnings, and there is a lot to cover here before we get to the game that we all know and some of us love. I want to preface this video by stating that I absolutely love Shadows of the Damned. It's one of my favorite Grasshopper titles, and I've beaten it a total of 6 times. I'm that crazy about it. However, the more I began to research the history of this game, the more hard truths I began to uncover. And then after going through it again with this new knowledge, I started to notice things that I had never paid attention to before. The truth about this game has to be told sometime, and unfortunately I'm the messenger here. So please, don't get the message twisted. I love the game, it's worth playing, but the whole story is a clusterfuck nightmare of epic proportions. There are some vague details about its history, either from an NDA or people keeping their lips shut. So I did the best I could with what I got. I'll address the more speculatory moments when they come, and you should take them with an extreme grain of salt. You see, Suda had an entirely different vision for this project, and according to the man himself, the initial concept for Shadows was rejected 4 times by EA before it culminated into the final product. Shadows of the Damned is so far removed from any prior Grasshopper title in the writing, structure, style, gameplay, and the plethora of concessions the developers made at the behest of its publisher. It ends up coming off as a clone of more successful games to come before it. Metaphorically speaking, it's like an indie band trying to formulate a hit song that would appeal to mainstream listeners by abandoning their signature style, which garnered their cult status in the first place. Shadows is a focus-tested, company man elevator pitch product that was overseen by an auteur at financial gunpoint and led by a ghost director whom was in charge of a team of Japanese developers that had no prior experience working in the Unreal Engine. This is a tale where East met West that ended tragically with a higher count of dead concepts and dreams than demons. This is the untold story of Shadows of the Damned. I remember when Shadows of the Damned was first announced. It was pitched as a Suda51 trip and was touted as having a dream team of developers behind the game. That dream team was comprised of Grasshopper's Suda51,
Shadows of the Damned.
Resident Evil's Shinji Mikami, and Silent Hill's Akira Yamoka providing the soundtrack. And quite frankly, this is a dream team to me. And you're reminded of this collaboration every time you boot the game through sweeping camera angles and title cards and monster growls. Ooh! Despite what you may have heard, Shadows of the Damned is not the first title that Shinji and Suda worked on together. For those unfamiliar, Killer 7 marked their first collaboration, and when comparing the development stories of these 2 separate projects and the resulting games, it's clear to me that the shortcomings of Shadows of the Damned were rooted in 2 drastically different working environments, more so than incompetence coming from either creator. What was so different about that collaboration that ended up giving us the quintessential Grasshopper title? What went so right? As the legend goes, it all started with a phone call from Shinji Mikami, whom was heading up the Capcom 5 project at the time, and he was seeking out developers to help with creating unique GameCube titles. He said, "Let's make a game together," and I immediately said, "Certainly." Now Suda was nervous about this collaboration, as he idolized Mikami. You see, Mikami was a legend in the games industry at this point, and at the peak of his career for making Goof Troop on the Super Nintendo. Oh, and for being one of the fathers of survival horror, but that's kind of a minor thing. During the production of Killer 7, Shinji acted as the supervisor of the game and acted as a mentor figure for Suda by encouraging Suda to fully design the game by himself from scratch in order to be a truly original creation. This collaboration was a dream come true for Suda, and he wanted to follow in the footsteps of his mentor by creating something truly innovative. When I decided to work with Mikami, I decided that I too should make a game from scratch. I thought making a distinction from things like clone games and copy games is necessary, so I started from scratch, including the button arrangements and everything else. It's a game that I made completely through trial and error. Suda recalls the environment he worked in during Killer 7's production allowed him to fully realize his vision. It was an environment full of encouragement, completely open to creativity, and he owed it all to Shinji Mikami. At that point, Mikami entrusted the making of the entire game to me. I think I was probably protected by him, even from Capcom. When the release date was pushed back, he provided an environment that let me create everything that I wanted to create. That kind of development is rather rare. The level of satisfaction from making that game was incredibly high. Truly, I feel that Mikami really protected me all the way. Even now, I'd like to do another project like this again. As a result of Mikami's encouragement, Killer 7 became a wholly original creation by Suda51. It's a title that is distinctly his own and one that is beyond comparison. It put Grasshopper manufacture on the map and made Suda51 a semi-obscure household name. In contrast, I cannot say the same for Shadows of the Damned. Oh yeah, Akira Yamaoka was also a member of this dream team. He's even listed on the back of the box. He must be important. What can I say here? Akira is just usually happy to be making music at all, and he just seems to be enthusiastic for whatever project comes his way. Whatever project. Shadows marked his second work with Grasshopper, his first being No More Heroes 2, and he would later become a regular music producer for the company, filling in for the absence of Masafumi Takada. He even wanted to pitch a sequel to Shadows of the Damned to EA. Man, I'd love to hear what he had prepared. But he's kept it a secret all these years later. In retrospect, I think Akira was the only person to walk away from this project with his dream fully realized. He even got a band out of the deal by forming the supergroup that he refers to as the Silent Hill Band, which is comprised of Mary Elizabeth McGlynn on vocals, Troy Baker on Expensive Scarf, and Joe Ramirza on Another Plane of Existence entirely. Now that I've established all the key players in our dream team, there was one more key figure in the development of Shadows of the Damned that EA forgot to mention on the back of the box. Massimo Guarini. Never heard of him? Prior to his work as director on Shadows, he was the lead design director for Open Season. Look, I understand that it's tough out there in the games industry. Everyone's gotta eat. Even Suda said that you gotta make licensed titles sometimes. But going from lead design director of Open Season to director of Shadows of the Damned doesn't exactly inspire confidence for a Grasshopper title. Perhaps I shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Well, in this case, I didn't. Cue the box, we're doing this shit. In the game, you play as Bug, the domesticated bear. He gets mixed up with Elliot, a one-antlered deer and one bad hombre.
I got something that'll make you come with me. Get a whiff of this.
He ends up robbing a convenience store for its woohoo bars. Then he gets tranked by cops and exiled to the forest, where all of the following gameplay mechanics are introduced. Pikmin-inspired deer launching. First-person bunny rabbit shooter. Bug takes a point-blank bullet to the face. Bug Kaida detonates a dirty bomb. wearing a grass skirt and spooking a hunter until he blinks out of existence. Donkey Kong minecart flop humping, gratuitous booty shaking, body slamming a hunter into a campfire and lighting another hunter on fire, body slamming a hunter into a bear trap, throwing a hunter off a 3-foot cliff until he blinks out of existence, shooting a hunter with a face-raping rabbit, Boog and Elliot fuck a snowball mechanic, giving a smelly hunter a bath while listening to obscenely loud bluegrass music, first-person bra-propelled porcupine launcher, riding an outhouse down a wild river and waterboarding a hunter at the same time, survival horror bear stealth mission, teaching kids to make an improvised explosive mechanic, trapping trappers in the trapper's traps, deer LARPs as Leatherface for a stage, impossible physics engine, a surprisingly deep role-playing skill tree, Duck Dynasty DDR, beaver torpedo bridge busting, anticlimactic final boss fight followed by a slideshow ending with bluegrass drowning out your thoughts.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
Guarini is a literal genius and deserved a spot on the back of the box. Massimo was hired on a year into Grasshopper's deal with EA during one of the many refocusing periods of the project, and I assume that this was a move made to get someone in place that was more familiar working in Western game studios in charge. From that point forward, he was in total creative control over Shadows, with Suda overseeing some of the creative decisions Massimo would present, but ultimately, this became Massimo's project. It's evident that the end result of Shadows can be attributed to Massimo's love for B-movies. That's probably why there are so many references to movies thrown around in Shadows.
Why do I feel like I'm in a movie?
What, were you raised in a barn?
Good to know we have the same tastes.
What kind of game are you trying to make Shadows of the Dam? What kind of, what kind of experience are you trying to give to the player as you guys work on this project?
Well, I had the opportunity to influence quite a bit Shadows of the Dam with my own taste as well. I think what I personally brought to the game is that kind of like typical 80s B-movie style that you can easily see in the game.
He's personally responsible for why Shadows became known as a road movie set in hell.
Garcia Hotspur was a man that had it all. A killer motorcycle, a sweet leather jacket, and a hot girlfriend. From hell.
In my mind, Shadows of the Damned is just as much a Massimo Guarini fever dream as it was a Suda51 trip. For all the flaws Shadows may have in the end result, I'm not gonna pin the blame on just one man for its shortcomings, as Massimo has more than proven himself as a visionary director. And I'm not just saying that because Open Season was so damn good. Shortly after Shadows, he left Grasshopper and went on to form his own studio, Ovo Sonico, where he developed cult indie titles like Murasaki Baby and The Last Day of June. Both are lauded for their emotional storytelling and very unique styles. It's a shame that EA didn't give this man his due praise. He was given a game halfway into development, and he basically saved the project from becoming vaporware. In the case of Shadows of the Damned, it wasn't the director behind the curtain to blame. There's a lot more to this story. In our next act, we will be taking a look at the origins of Shadows and the lost game that was killed during development. The origins of Shadows of the Damned can be traced back as far as 2006, which was 1 year after Killer 7 was released and during the dark days of Grasshopper's anime adaptation phase. With the confidence from having a minor hit on his hands, Suda set his sights on the recently announced PlayStation 3 with a new and equally ambitious concept for the platform. This project would be called Kurayami, which means darkness. In a 2006 interview with Edge magazine, Suda unveiled his concept for Kurayami. The title was set to be a free-roaming action game set in a castle town shrouded in darkness, where the protagonist would explore the village with his torch and interact with an eccentric cast of bizarre villagers. Stealth was emphasized in this game, and the hero would have to wander around in the darkness with his torch, avoiding monsters and certain death. He would only be safe in well-lit areas. German surrealist Franz Kafka served as the inspiration for the world of Kurayami, with Suda specifically stating Kafka's castle was his own attempt at adapting Kafka. I've never read The Castle, but according to Wikipedia, it's a story about a man named K, which some believe to be a Kafka self-insert character. And the story centers around K being summoned to a bizarre town that's ruled by a bureaucracy comprised of officials that operate from a large castle just outside of the village. It centers around K's frustration of trying to conduct business while being forced to follow non-transparent, seemingly arbitrary rules set by the shadow bureaucrats on the hill. K is constantly frustrated due to not being able to communicate with the castle officials despite all of his best efforts. K comes to the eventual realization that the bureaucracy is full of shit and don't know what they're talking about. The story ends mid-sentence and lacks a true resolution. Outside of the motifs of light and darkness, much of what the initial concept of Kurayami was lost in the transition to Shadows of the Damned. In Suda's own words, Kurayami's ideas are not about violence or eroticism, but fundamental problems in the human mind. A statement which seems like a far cry from the overtly violent and the walking on titties nature of Shadows. Suda held out hope that he would eventually find a publisher for Kurayami, and he continued to work on the concept for many years to come. In 2008, he presented his new ideas for Kurayami at Grasshopper's 10th anniversary party. This time around, it was intended to be more of an action RPG, wherein the protagonist could go into town, find a tailor, and make himself some new clothes. To change things up, he wanted to create a game that wasn't dependent on using guns. In this concept art, you can see a man with a lantern wandering around a dark village. Here, you can see the various evolutions of Garcia's character design. He went from a shirtless wanderer bearing a torch to an upper-class Eastern European gentleman, to Garcia Hotspur as we know him, but this time in a business suit. Although it's evident that Kurayami was the basis for Shadows of the Damned, Suda51 adamantly denied this claim during a 2009 interview with Joystick. Anything you can tell us about Kurayami? There's no real update, sorry. Is it still in development? It's not even in development right now. Is it canceled? We aren't even really working on it. We've just been talking about it, you know, but there just hasn't been time to work on it. A bunch of sites posted the artwork again, and for a while everyone thought it was new. One day, it's not canceled. I haven't given up on it. One day, I'll have time to work on this title. So what's the real story? Was Kurayami a separate game from Shadows of the Damned? Or was Suda attempting to distance the two ideas by hiding the basis for Shadows, in the event that he could eventually create his initial concept in the future? Well, it was Mr. Loose Lips himself, Shinji Mikami, that was the first to publicly reveal the truth about the fate of Kurayami and its eventual transition into Shadows. No, it became a completely different game. That was a bit disappointing. I think Suda was unable to create the scenario he'd originally had in his head, and rewrote the scenario several times. I think his heart was broken. He's such a unique creator, so it seems to me that he was not quite comfortable with making this game. Bear with me, but I don't know where else to fit in this next bit, but I can't shake the feeling that Shinji accidentally or deliberately stole a bit of Suda's concept for Kurayami and repurposed it into another game. In 2010, Mikami formed Tango Gameworks and began development on The Evil Within, which is a psychological thriller about a man with a lantern wandering around a vacant, dark village. Oh, there's more to it than that. In the Assignment DLC, you play as Jolie, whom spends most of the campaign wandering around in the dark with her flashlight and avoiding combat. Now, there is one small shooting segment that's forced, but for the most part, you have to rely on stealth and your wits to survive this DLC. Exploration is highly emphasized over fighting this time around. Furthermore, there's even a mode in the assignment that you unlock after beating it the first time called Kurayami, wherein all the maps are shrouded in complete darkness and your flashlight is the only source of light. Shinji, you son of a bitch. This DLC must be the last we're ever gonna hear of Kurayami, right? Oh no. Suda, not one to give up on his initial vision, refocused the project into a more attainable goal by turning Kurayami into a manga known as Kurayami Dance in 2015. Now, to this date, the manga hasn't been translated into any other languages. Unfortunately, this is a case where I can only judge a book by its cover at the moment. Here, I can see the initial concept of Garcia seems to be a character in the manga. And what's this? The protagonist seems to have a silver eye. Oh, here we go again with this silver eye shit. Let's get down to brass tacks. Did Kurayami ever enter development, or was it just shot down instantly and turned into Shadows of the Damned from the get-go? Prepare yourselves for some speculation, and I'll do my best to reinforce my ideas with examples. I can't help but wonder if the opening area of Shadows of the Damned is a brief taste of what Kurayami could have been. The first time you gain control of Garcia, he wanders around an open stretch of highway with the gate to hell standing before him in the distance. If you turn around, all you're presented with is an open road shrouded in complete darkness, and you're left listening to an eerie Silent Hill-esque soundscape crafted by Yamoka that is one of the most chilling and lonely moments that the game evokes. This is one of the only times where Garcia holds Johnson as a torch without any input from the player. Was this setup a coincidence? Or was this moment symbolic of Suda turning his back on his original concept and casting Garcia into hell itself? Not exactly. I still contend that there's a lot more left over of Kurayami than many people would notice their first time around. After entering the gate to hell, it seemed to me that most, if not all, of the medieval village concept for Kurayami was repurposed into Shadows. Let's refer back to the concept art. Check out this brick awning with the Grim Reaper in front of it. Well, that awning is still here. And speaking of Grim Reapers, are the Sisters Grimm a carryover of this idea? Are they? Maybe? You can also get a glance of Fleming's castle off in the distance, just outside of the village. Remember Kafka's The Castle? Only this time around it's a large protruding penis. Close. I don't know about you, but my mental image of hell doesn't include an Eastern European castle village adorned with street lamps and torches. Why are there light bulbs in all the homes you enter? It just seems totally out of place. The abundant light is also counter to the game's logic, as the demons are weakened by light. Coming off of playing through this game 6 times, I have to admit, the entire experience feels segmented, as if the developers had initially intended for the game to be more open and free roaming, like in Kurayami's initial concept, and then when the game transitioned, they had to close off many of the interconnecting pathways. The entire experience is linear, as Garcia is forced to go through highlighted doorways and windows all the time, as if they had to dumb down the exploration in fear of the player getting lost. Oh no, I'm lost. Where am I? Oh, thank God there's a crying baby door to guide me in the right direction. They also have this neat little trick to bypass the fragmented layout of town. Anytime Garcia needs to get to another part of the map with no logical junction point, they just throw in a darkness portal and he can traverse through it and exit out on the other side to place him wherever he's needed. There are even times when Fleming's hand just comes out of nowhere, grabs Garcia, and drops him into another portion of the map. As a result, the level design comes off as sloppy, with little to no cohesion, with the sole exception being the Resident Evil 4 Spanish Village that totally isn't the Resident Evil 4 Spanish Village because it's still filled with baby gates that prevent you from exploring freely. I know this segmentation could be merely written off as hell, taking whatever the shape it wants to, much like Dracula's castle in Castlevania. But with the abundance of blocked off corridors, it comes off as a last-minute compromise as a way to retrofit the already completed levels of Kurayami. The most obvious example of Kurayami's leftovers being utilized, of course, are the light and dark gameplay mechanics. Throughout the game, Garcia is forced to traverse the dark corridors to seek out areas of light for safety. Dark areas make the demons stronger and will gradually drain Garcia's life. In many cases, Garcia just has to shoot a light shot at a goat head to generate light for the area. In this sense, a fraction of the initial concept for the gameplay was used, but with all the violence, eroticism, and guns, it's so far away from what Suda had envisioned that it's no wonder that he denied Kurayami was in development at all.